A little Wednesday edition of Tales from the Couch for you here. We'll start with Dallas and Minnesota, a rematch of the Western Conference Finals. Ant goes off in the first quarter for 25 points. I think Clay was the original defensive assignment. As much as I like Clay and the Mavs, that's a spot where you're thinking, all right, well, Derek Jones will probably be a little bit better for this specific matchup. But Ant was attacking. Something to look at coming into last night's game through three. Anthony Edwards had taken 70 total shots, right? 40 of those 70 shots were from three, and he added 13 more attempts last night. So by game through the 4 games, 3-point attempts for Ant, 13, 15, 12, and 13. Well, he's shooting 42% on threes, so you can't be mad at him taking those. He's averaging 30 a game. He's a top 5 scorer. But I liked, at least in the first quarter, where it felt like he was attacking a little bit more, but I don't know if he was attacking more because he saw Klay Thompson on him. Then we saw some PJ Washington on him. And Klay was definitely, when you're watching teams and how they're trying to set up their offenses and find the weak link, Klay was that person that Minnesota was trying to find, and Randall was the person that Dallas was trying to find in some of their switches. And then again, Ant did one of my things that I just will never understand. He had Klay on him late in a possession and then switched into PJ Washington, which guys just like. I know that part of it is the reward of getting people to switch and then move around defensively and all that kind of stuff. The real story how Dallas won, there's a couple different reasons, but one is they didn't turn it over. 9 turnovers for them, 20 for Minnesota, who had massive turnover nights. So that's 16 more shot attempts on the game. Minnesota missed a bunch of free throws, including Ant. So there's a way of kind of like looking at the math here, saying, okay, Minnesota could have won this game. But there's a couple other things. Conley's really struggled to start this. I mean, he's 37 years old, and he's 23 and 27% from the floor right now. He's only playing 24 minutes per game, so it's worth looking at some of the DiVincenzo stuff. Also, transition defense continues to be an issue. It's been, I don't know if Stan Van Gundy's had 2 of the Minnesota games. Maybe he has. So he's definitely pointed out, and you do see it, although overall in points allowed, because again, we're so early with the number stuff a week into the NBA season that some of these numbers are just dumb or don't mean anything or aren't as telling as you'd expect them to be. So they're 12th in transition points allowed. I just think there's some times where some new pieces, I mean, it's pretty simple stuff of knowing who's supposed to get back and who's not getting back, but it just looks like there's times they're getting beat in transition because they're just not as locked in as they should be. Denver's, I think, the worst team right now is allowing points in transition. I mean, this number's stupid. Oklahoma City's the best in the league. They're allowing an average of 1.7 points per game through 4 in transition, so that's not going to hold up. But overall, defensively is the bigger story for Minnesota. 13th in defensive rating. They were number 1 last season. Dallas is 3-1. And Luka isn't even shooting that well at 36 and 27% splits. Kyrie's been great. I love when he's at like 18 plus shot attempts per game. I think like that 18 to 20 range is exactly where you'd want him. He took 23 last night. He was 6-8 from 3 for 35 points. And the biggest thing with Dallas is that even with the new piece of Clay and Grimes, and a lot of Dinwiddie last night, is that I think the rest of the pieces like really know who they are. And it's comforting. I saw 2 teams last night, one that was pretty sure of what they were going to be doing, and Minnesota that's still kind of trying to figure that out. But it wasn't like they got smoked or anything. So there you go. Golden State was down 31-14 after the first quarter. No Curry last night. Some incredible lineups from Golden State. And looking at the weird lineups, I'm thinking, all right, we got a Kuminga, Looney, Gary Payton, Podziemski, Buddy Hield lineup. Then there was another one with Draymond Green, Waters, who's been, when OKC has a guy like Waters on the roster for a couple of years, it's probably worth just going, hey, should we try to get him and play him a little bit more? And I think that's something Golden State's been rewarded for very early on. The shooting numbers are good. The volume's obviously not going to be that high. But yeah, this lineup was Waters with Green, with Trace Jackson Davis, Kyle Anderson, and Kuminga, who came off the bench last night, even with the Curry injury. So like that lineup, I'm going, where's the shooting going to be here? But what last night's game was an example of just effort, because the intensity that the Warriors played with defensively and how after they got passing lanes, diving all over the place, like that was a coach's dream. Watching that film, and I don't know that they would even want to compliment their team enough, but if you sat and watched the film, I imagine with that Warrior staff and just the sheer effort and how it turned that game last night, that's the kind of stuff. That's why coaches yell at everybody, because they're like, if you just did that all the time, it'd be impossible. On the other side, like Pelicans, very quickly, as I go through all the teams, I try to get all 30 teams within the first week. to be able to see, just kind of how things look, but it obviously can change a lot game to game. Then there becomes this group of teams early on where I think, well, I don't have to make watching them a priority because I think I just know exactly what it's going to look like. Like I like watching Sacramento, but I'm pretty sure I have it down already. The Pelicans are dangerously close to that too. They've got their injuries. We know DeJounte's out. Herb got hurt last night. Trey Murphy hasn't played. They're starting Tice at center, but Yves Missy's actually getting more minutes, and I think he's been really active. And man, if he's a real big option for them with a team that has aspirations, and you nail that pick in the middle of the first round, that's going to be massive if that works out for them. I mean, Zion's played the 3 games, and it looks a lot like Zion. I mean, he's still so young that sometimes I'll think, can he still have this burst? Can he still have these moves? Well, I point out when other people freak out that LeBron James at this age is dunking, and I'm like, well, he is 6'8", so he probably should still be able to dunk. He's not 60. But then I'll have a moment with Zion where he had a baseline spin last night where I was like, well, okay, I don't know that we have to worry about this. And it probably has more to do with Zion's injury history than it does his age. And then you've got Aldi, KD, Brandon Ingram, who's going to get his 25 a game. And certain moments, it's going to look really nice because the shot making is incredible. But I don't know that there's going to be something where the Pelicans all of a sudden have this run where I go, oh, wow, I have to pay more attention to them and take them more seriously. All right, Denver, another overtime win last night in Brooklyn. So Denver's 2-2, back-to-back nights. They win in Toronto in overtime. They went down to the last possession against the Clippers. They got smoked by OKC. So that's 4 games of this stuff. And by the way, when they won in Toronto, Barnes got hit in the face really hard on kind of like a free-for-all and a rebound. So the Raptors didn't even have Barnes in overtime. And by the way, shout out to the Raptors, playing pretty hard in some of these games. So Denver gets through these with 2 wins. So let's look at Jokic and his approach. So when they lost to OKC, he took 13 shots. When they lost to the Clippers, it was well, I'm not going to do that again if this is what I'm surrounded by. He took 26 shots against the Clippers, 12 from 3, 27 shots against Toronto. Last night, he was 9 of 16 against Brooklyn, but the reason it's only 16 shot attempts is because he went to the free throw line 13 times because he was fouled constantly. The workload here for Jokic is kind of concerning. Now, granted, Jokic from 30 seconds from the tip looks like he's already out of shape, and then that's just the way it's going to look the entire game. If you look at his touches right now on the season, he's at 111 touches per game. He's 8 more than Trae Young, who touches the ball a lot. That's 8 more than the guy who's second in that category. Last season, Jokic was 101 touches per game. Now it's 111. And even though he goes for 29, 18, and 16, and I can say, I don't know if he can play like this, though, for the 70-plus games that he would play. And it's met with, well, of course he's going to get his numbers and all. I think we're seeing it differently. It's like 80 pitches versus 80 pitches. There's a game where a pitcher will have 80, 85 pitches, and the stress of those pitches is nothing in compared to the next time he has to throw 85 pitches. So you can't just look at 40 minutes. You can't just look at shot attempts and the rebounds and say, what's the difference here? Because what I am seeing is a workload that Jokic, it's so much. Let's run through overtime, all right? Because this is something else I'm going to be paying attention to. Jokic touches in overtime. All right, single coverage against Claxton, fouled free throws. Single coverage, DFS ended up on him. He posts him up, offensive rebound, where he made the offensive rebound, but he was posting him up in single coverage on a Michael Porter Jr. cut. He missed it, offensive rebound. Jokic scores. All right, single coverage again against Claxton. Michael Porter Jr. cut against Cam Thomas. Cam was a little late with it. His off-ball defense is, what you would expect in a high-volume scorer. But he's just too big. He was behind the play anyway, so I don't know that he's really even going to challenge that one. Single coverage by Claxton off the ball. He was fouled. They were fighting over position there. So then the Nets tried to double him. They doubled him on a catch with Cam Johnson. And then the thing you cannot do is you cannot lose Aaron Gordon on double teams of Jokic. Guess what? Gordon cuts baseline. It's just the first play you have to think about in Gordon's positioning whenever you want to send a double at Jokic. And then there was kind of like this soft double that wasn't really a double. It was in a transition scramble, and Christian Brown was on the other side, hits a wide open 3. But if you watch these plays, the amount of work it will take Jokic to consistently get into these positions, because he's just too big for Claxton. He's too big for the front line of the Nets. So he's just working and working his position. This is like the high stress pitching from a pitcher, because even with all the touches and all the shot attempts and the raw stats that Jokic had in previous MVP seasons, there were still plays where he could catch it at the top, operate from the top of the three-point line. He didn't have to run into the post and bang and bang and bang and work the entire possession, multiple possessions in a row, because there was just more flow to this offense with more shooters in the past and whatever Jamal Murray is right now, where I think people think it's maybe worse than I do. There were times in the Toronto game where I thought he was hurt again or something was going on, but he's never going to look like Westbrook, prime Westbrook. So it can be a little misleading when Murray doesn't look like super explosive, because he's not really that guy anyway. And he also made the game-tying layup against Toronto on a really nice reverse layup. So the point I am emphasizing, probably a third time here, is that we can talk touches, we can talk shot attempts or whatever, but the work that I saw from Jokic against Toronto and the work I saw from him against Brooklyn is a lot to ask of one guy that apparently kind of realizes, like, I guess I got to do more of this. As he admitted very early on in the season in one of the post-game availabilities, he was like, yeah, we don't have much shooting. It's like, okay, it's hard to argue. And the reason I bring up the single coverage versus the double teams is I wonder, and some of it will have to do with who else is out there with him, is as much as you never wanted to double Jokic, because you actually, I felt like, paid a worse price. Like, would you look at certain lineups around him where you may go, well, do we have to try to show him something here a little bit? I really only saw one Nets double team from that. All right. So the game was over. Cam Thomas, worth bringing up. We know he's not my favorite guy because he was fourth in shot attempt rate in the NBA last year with Luka, Brunson, and Steph Curry. But he's sixth in scoring now. His usage has gone way up, but his efficiency has had a massive spike off the usage, which usually doesn't happen with somebody who's like this high volume of a guy. He's one of 12 shooters or 12 players in the NBA right now with 20 or more shot attempts. Maxi's taking 28.7 shots per game, which is a large number. But Cam's using his size really well. The shot making is really special. He is foul hunting a bit. He hooked Aaron Gordon's off arm, and Aaron Gordon's going to just have PTSD from this because it happened to him just this weekend against Harden in a huge spot where Ben Taylor reviewed it after a challenge. It was very clear that Harden hooked Gordon's arm, and for some reason Ben Taylor was like, yeah, it's just not enough evidence for all this stuff. By the way, Harden has his highest usage rate since his last season in Houston. So yes, Cam, special shot maker. I just think it's a lot of shots, unless you think that he actually is going to be a star in the league, which maybe some people do. The East right now, as we finish up, has 4 teams over 500. What are 4 games? Only 3 teams with a plus point differential. The Knicks are 2-2. They're 29th in defensive efficiency in the NBA. I can't imagine that's going to hold up with all these perimeter guys. There was some turnstile moments for Cat against Cleveland. That was an awesome win by Cleveland. They didn't even have Strus. Mobley feels super connected. But there were some moments where you get past the initial defense and then you're driving a Cat. It's just, there's not going to be a lot of resistance there. Tibbs goes with him with the early subs. He's still 4th in minutes on the Knicks. So, longtime minute management guy, Tom Thibodeau. I don't know that he's pacing him here, but he's actually still playing a lot of minutes, unless you are super into the Huck Porty minutes, although he had a dunk that was pretty nasty. I'm not going to say it was overturned. It didn't count. All right. Couple numbers here. The NBA has 10 teams taking 40 threes or more a game, 40 or more threes a game, right? Last year, only 2 teams did. 2016 Golden State, they took 31.6 3-point attempts per game. That was 8 years ago. That number would put them at 24th in the NBA today. Speaking of threes, my favorite 3-point attempt of the season, Wizards 2 nights ago, their win against Atlanta. Washington up 115, 108, 209 left. Scramble for the ball, ends up with Alex Sarr. He takes a 3 with 7 seconds left on the shot clock, up 7, wanting to run. He missed it. I do like Koulibaly, though. I liked his activity. And he was hunting Trae Young like he was a podcaster.